Ghosts, cryptids, aliens, and unexplainable events. I'm your host, Paul, and this is Bizarre, Tales of the Unknown and Unexplained. The following stories are events that happen to people just like you. Could you be one of them? Share your story by emailing us at bizarretales@mail.com. Strange things happen all the time. Things that are truly bizarre. This story comes from Veronica in Ohio. My husband and I purchased a house right before we were married. It was new construction, and we lived in it for 3 years without any incident. I gave birth to our daughter, Kara, during our 4th year there, and it was after that point that things started getting weird. I kept seeing shadows moving in broad daylight just out of the corner of my eye, usually when Kara was lying on her blankie on the living room floor or when I was nursing her. Sometimes I could swear I saw a man standing in a doorway or someone running across the hallway from one room to another. It was especially frightening because my husband never saw them, but I could. I wondered sometimes if I was going crazy. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to hear Kara giggling and cooing through the monitor. I think she was about 8 months old at the time. At first I just listened to it, half awake, waiting for her to decide she was hungry and start fussing. I thought she was looking at all the little tigers and elephants and giraffes on the mobile hanging over her crib. Then I heard what sounded like someone moving around her room. I know the sound Kara makes when she's just moving around in her bed. This was different. I could hear it passing by the monitor, and when I listened harder, I thought I heard soft footsteps. I freaked out and woke up my husband, telling him there was someone in the baby's room. He woke up and listened too, and we both distinctly heard a soft male voice say something. Later, my husband said he didn't make out any words, but I thought I heard,
"She belongs to us now."
Naturally, I jumped out of bed and rushed to Kara's room. My husband grabbed his gun and followed, trying to make me stop. He was worried I'd burst into Kara's room and right into the arms of an intruder, but I was so terrified for my baby I didn't care. When we opened the door, Kara was sitting up in her crib, wide awake, but no one else was in the room. It was just her. Her nightlight was on, so we could see as soon as we got in that we were alone. That event was really upsetting, but now I knew my husband didn't think I was crazy anymore. He'd heard that voice, and it bothered him. As Kara grew, the more intense things got. She would sit in the middle of the floor and intensely watch something moving around the room, sometimes babbling and pointing at it. Gradually, on top of the moving shadows and figures, I'd hear voices, just snippets of sentences and indistinguishable words. Once I was cleaning the bathroom while Kara was napping, and I distinctly heard the front door open and my husband call my name. Thinking he had come home from work early, I left the bathroom, but didn't find him. He wasn't there. I even called him and asked if he'd come home. He said he was on a work site 40 minutes away. I packed Kara up as soon as she was awake and went to visit my mother until my husband came home. My husband was taking my incidents seriously now, ever since that night with the baby monitor. We decided to move, which I was more than happy to do. We put the place up for sale, downsized our belongings, and moved into a duplex on the other side of town, kind of as a transition place until we sold the house and found a new home. I was excited to get out of there and get away from the shadows and voices. My excitement ended the very first night we moved in. We'd stacked boxes in the living room to unpack as we settled in. We'd just gone to bed when we heard a big crash. We rushed downstairs to find our stacked boxes littered across the room. Now keep in mind, we'd stacked them well. They didn't just topple over. They'd been shoved over with enough force to scatter them all the way across the room. My husband was absolutely stumped. I knew deep down that we hadn't escaped the haunting. It had followed us to our new home, and this was its way of letting us know. We tried to make the best of things, though. The atmosphere in that house was really heavy and dark. My husband thought maybe the place just needed a touch-up, maybe a fresh coat of paint and nice drapes. And over the course of a couple of weekends, he gave the whole place a brand new coat of bright white paint. It didn't help. I knew it wouldn't. This was something a paintbrush and a ladder weren't going to fix. About a month after we moved in, Kara would wake up crying every night, not just hungry or gassy or anything like that. We'd come into her room and she'd be terrified, reaching for us. We ended up moving her crib into our room so she wouldn't be alone. It seemed to help, for a while. One night I woke up and felt someone sit down on the edge of the bed, the side Kara's crib was on. I knew it wasn't my husband because he was sound asleep on the other side of me. It wasn't my imagination. It was a solid body. I felt it press the mattress down and the covers shifted toward it. I felt something solid press against my calf. The small of the person's back, I'm guessing. The person just sat there. Typically, I would have thought it was an intruder, but so many weird things had been happening, I had no idea. I was petrified. I didn't dare look. I had no idea what I'd see, and I didn't want to find out. I slowly inched my hand over to my husband and poked him. He didn't wake up, so I pinched him. I pinched him hard, 3 times. He still didn't wake up. I was trying so hard not to cry or make any noise to show I was awake. Whoever was sitting on the edge of the bed hadn't moved. I prayed silently, still pinching my husband. I desperately wanted him to wake up and make this nightmare go away. Then suddenly the weight lifted, as if the person had stood up, and a second later Kara started screaming in terror. I sat right up and turned on the lamp next to the bed. Nobody was there. Kara was lying on her back, staring up in fear as she cried. I snatched her up and tried to soothe her, and my husband groggily rolled over and asked if she was okay. I told him what had happened. He just hung his head with a frustrated sigh. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I did the only thing I could think of and visited some online paranormal forums and asked some questions. I said I was asking for a friend. Lame, I know, but I was afraid of being made fun of. Fortunately, there were a lot of people who tried to be helpful. One person suggested sage. Another suggested having a priest or minister come bless the house. Someone else said it wasn't the house. Based on the timing, this forum user was sure my friend's baby was haunted. Now that terrified me, but it made sense. That was why it had started around the time Kara was born and had followed us to the new place, but it meant there was no running away from it. We had to make it go away somehow. One person said I should just straight up tell the spirits or whatever it was to go away and leave me alone. But someone else said trying direct confrontation would be acknowledging it and would only encourage it. Everyone had different ideas, and by the time I got done, I was kind of afraid to try any of them. I was even wondering if discussing it online was going to make it angry. I did what I thought was safest and took Kara to 3 different people, a priest and 2 ministers, one Lutheran and another Methodist. I asked them to bless her. The ministers thought it was a strange request and asked why, and I just told them we were having trouble and I wanted to be sure she'd be okay. They prayed over her, but then offered things like marriage counseling and things like that. I didn't tell them what was going on. The priest actually came right out and asked if Kara was under spiritual attack. I told him what was happening. He took me seriously. He blessed Kara and gave me a little bottle of holy water and a crucifix. I sprinkled all our doors with holy water and said prayers over each one. I also sprinkled Kara's bed and hung the crucifix over it. Things settled down. I didn't see any shadows or hear any voices. Kara went back to sleeping through the night. Eventually, we sold the house and bought a new one much closer to where my husband works. It's a smaller place, but I love it. It's one of those stereotypical white picket fence suburban places with a spreading oak tree in the front yard. I had such a good time turning it into our home. We've been living in this house for a year with no problems. at least until just last week. Kara has been spending a lot of time staring at the basement stairs. Last night I thought I heard footsteps on the front porch, but when I looked, nobody was there. That could have just been my imagination. But that dark, heavy feeling is coming back, and I'm scared. I don't know what's so fixated on my little girl or why, but I'm at a loss as to what to do. I really hope when Kara can talk, she'll be able to tell me more, and it'll give us some idea of what's going on and how to deal with it. But right now, all I can do is pray. Toby writes from Oklahoma. I keep having these moments where I'm somewhere else. Not daydreaming, I mean actually somewhere else, at least consciously. I'll just be doing something, maybe watching TV or reading a book or something, and then suddenly I'll find myself someplace else, not just in space, but in time. I don't know if you'd call it astral projection, but that's the closest term I can come up with. Visions, maybe. The first time it happened, I was in high school, and it scared the crap out of me. I was in Spanish class, of all places, listening to the teacher. Then suddenly it was like someone changed the channel on a TV, and I wasn't in Spanish class anymore. I was looking at a little girl, probably about 8 years old. At first, I thought she was asleep, but then as things cleared a little bit, I saw people crying and realized she was in a casket. It was her funeral. Nobody seemed to notice me, even though I was right there, next to her. And then I was back in Spanish class. That shook me up so badly I couldn't focus on anything. I went straight home as soon as school let out. It's happened a lot since then. I don't have any real control over when it happens or what I see. It's pretty random. I've noticed that it tends to happen when I'm stationary, sitting in my living room or standing in line. Once it happened while I was driving to a family reunion, and what really terrified me was that somehow I managed to drive about 10 miles without an accident while my consciousness was somewhere else. I don't know how I managed it, but it happened. I had to pull over for a few minutes after that incident. I don't like driving for that reason. Since then, whenever possible, I walk or take a bike. I wonder what would happen if I were to get into a deadly accident while out of body, but I don't want to find out. I've had a lot of them. They happen sporadically. I might go for a few months without anything happening and then get a spate of about 1 or 2 a week for a while. Sometimes it's completely boring stuff. I found myself in the middle of forests I didn't recognize a couple of times. Once I was in an alley behind someone's house, just looking into their yard. The only thing that stood out to me was that the grass needed cutting. Thrilling stuff, I know, but every so often I'll be witness to something disturbing or outright terrifying. The thing is, I don't know if what I'm seeing is real. That bothers me, mainly for the following reasons. Every once in a while, I've watched myself. That's right, me, as if I'm standing in a corner, watching myself go about my day, completely oblivious to my astral self. The only thing is, sometimes I watch the same scene in my life play over. I've always been pretty sure it's sometime in the future because I don't remember the place. It's a nice little apartment kitchen and I'm fixing myself a smoothie. I'm breaking out strawberries, bananas, that sort of stuff, tossing it all into the blender. There's a knock at the door and I go to open it. There's a young guy standing there. He looks Hispanic, and he's got this big toothy smile like I've never seen. One of those smiles that could blind you, there's so much teeth. I say, "Hey man, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" Like I know him from somewhere. The guy pushes me inside, closes the door, and pulls a knife. He attacks me. I've never seen anything past that point. I don't know whether he kills me or what. I've had that same vision at least 5 times, and it's really freaked me out. I've never had any of my other visions repeat, but this one has repeated enough and terrified me enough that every single detail is burned into my memory. Just last month, I was informed by my landlord that he's selling the little house I'm renting, that I have to move. He was really apologetic and told me he'd already put in a good word for me at a nice apartment complex just a mile or 2 away. I appreciated that. He's a good guy. Anyway, I made an appointment to view the apartments, and the first place they showed me gave me chills. The kitchen, the door, everything. It's the exact same apartment I keep seeing in the repeat visions, where I watch myself getting attacked. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I'm sure the lady who showed me the place thought I was acting pretty weird. But here's the thing. Those apartments are very reasonable. They're the only place within a decent distance of my work that I can afford. I've looked around, so I know. I've even considered asking my dad to let me move in with him, but he's got a really small place and we don't get along very well. I couldn't come up with a good reason to give him anyway. I've never told him about my visions. I don't think he'd believe me. I've kicked it around for a long time. I've been exploring options, but my deadline is coming up. So I broke down and put in an application for the apartment. It was approved super fast. I guess my landlord's good word carries a lot of weight with those people. Last week I went to a party at my buddy's place and met this Hispanic guy named Chester, and he's got that grin, that huge, blinding smile from my vision. He was pleasant, he seemed to get along great with everybody, but the second I saw him I thought I was going to throw up. I left that party as soon as I got a chance. So now here I am, my stuff packed up, ready to move to the new apartment, and I've never been more freaked out in my life. I have to move out in the next 2 days. The apartment is ready for me, and I'm sitting here questioning everything. Are my visions real? Should I just rationalize my way through this, or go with my gut? I have nothing to go on except these visions. I can't tell anyone, or they'll think I'm nuts. Maybe I'll just buy a gun and keep it on hand and hope for the best. Thank you for listening to Bizarre, Tales of the Unknown and Unexplained. Be sure to subscribe for more strange stories. If you would like to share your own unearthly experience with us, please send an email to bizarretales@mail.com. Share this show with your friends and family, and watch for future episodes. All content is copyrighted and can only be used with permission.